Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your host, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense. Welcome back into the Beyond Pain podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Gambino. I'm here with our other host, Joe LaVacca. Change of our normal intro, Joe, because today is our 100th episode.
Big day.
So we made it a long way, Joe.
Almost, yeah. Two years. And I got to say, man, this has been a blast. I've loved doing this with you. I want to thank the listeners for
Samesies.
Staying engaged with us and helping us grow, especially over the last few months. Thank you for that. So we just kind of keep asking, keep sharing it, keep tagging friends or family. The more that you can put this out there to the masses, the more we'll have ideas to get to help other people. But 100 episodes, man, I didn't know where we would start or stop, but I'm here for the long run. Here's to another 100.
We start at zero,
man.
Joe. We know where
we start at zero.
We don't know where we're ending.
That's fair.
Don't know where we're ending. But on that note, we are doing a little bit of a giveaway for the 100th episode. So if you were to drop our podcast review, all you have to do is screenshot it to either myself or LaVacca over there. So at Joe Gambino DPT for myself, at Strength and Motion _PT for LaVacca. Once you do that, we will continue our conversation and we will send over a lovely Beyond Pain podcast mug.
Ooh, all right. Coffee mug for everybody. Make sure you get on that, because if your house is like everybody else's house, you cannot have another mug, or you can't have too many. So please, let us fit our Beyond Pain podcast mug into your life. And I hope it becomes your favorite mug. And maybe you could even crack it out every Friday or whenever you listen to the podcast, right? And then
I like that.
Maybe you and I get some mugs too. So it's like we're really creating a mug community.
Yes. I think either way, we deserve some merch. So
I think so too.
We'll make it happen.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think maybe, we have summer gear, we have winter gear. I'm into this. I'm really into this. I'm really excited. So this has been really, really cool, Joe. Thank you so much. I always credit you as the impetus for this, kind of like pushing us to do this. So it's been a blast, man. And I've learned a lot from you over the last 2 years, and even the guests. I've had a blast, even people I'd never heard of or never knew about before. I think I've genuinely taken something from every single guest. So we got a lot of other ideas for guests in the future. And I think, it'll be even more fun next year.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, the message here of being able to, get some people listening in, have a positive impact on their life and their pain, and helping them move forward. Because I sure do know that my journey with pain has been very long. So if we can give that back in any way, I'd be very happy to. Brings me joy.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely echo those sentiments as well. Well, before we both start crying, as Italian boys typically do, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about pain, obviously, but today specifically, do you need to know the source of pain? And maybe we could talk about it both from the physical therapist perspective and the client or the patient's perspective. I'll let you take the floor.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I guess we'll start from our perspective, because that's probably the easiest to speak to. I would probably say there's very few instances where I actually directly need to know the source of pain to help someone. And, the things that always come to mind are trauma. Did you fall? Did you get hit by something? I probably need to know that, or we probably need to know that in order to correctly guide your care. Particularly, I have a few patients right now where the osteoporosis or osteopenia conversation is coming up. And for them, if they fall and they're shrugging off a pain or something that's nagging them, I'd probably be a little bit more concerned about wanting to get them some imaging or something along those lines. The second one would probably be overuse. Again, the thing that initially comes to mind as the weather gets nicer are shin splints or bone stress type injuries, right? Because I do want to be able to guide you into rest or modifying load as quickly as possible, maybe even getting into some bigger ideas on nutrition and recovery. So I think those two right there are the real big ones that stick out to me on I want to know about these things if they exist before we continue, whether we're in
Mm.
person or virtually. Do you have other ideas off the top of your head that stick out to you?
The Probably like the first one as we were talking, as you were listing some off, like bursitis kind of like came into my mind because they just don't typically enjoy being stretched, right? So it might change the way that we might go through things. But in general, I don't really know if we need to know the exact source of pain because mainly, I mean, I mean, in the physical therapy world, right? We don't come up with the medical diagnosis. It's nice if we can get close, right? So we can make decisions. Do we need to refer out? Do they need to get imaging? Do they need stuff like that? But mainly, we just need to know what areas, what movements are irritated or not, and where their movement limitations are so that we can slowly start to reintegrate, either bringing down the pain response or slowly improving that tissue's quality and resilience, right? So, and I think if you can focus mostly on that, you can tend to help a lot of people. And if you can't, then you're probably missing something that tells you, okay, maybe you really do need to know the source of the pain and imaging needs to happen to help figure that out. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think obviously I definitely agree with you. I think the other sort of side of this with, when we kind of get into more like soft tissue based things like bursitis, tendonitis, I find that sometimes those are hard to sometimes distinguish because I remember being at a course years and years ago and the instructor saying, you know, bursitis and tendonitis kind of go together like gin and tonic. So if you have one, you could probably assume the other. But I think that conversation, and maybe this is the second point about kind of maybe knowing generally where we think the
Mhm.
pain is coming from, just sets us up for a prognosis with someone. If I think your pain is a little bit more tendon based, and this could be because of it's irritated with activity, it's irritated with certain positions, particularly when those positions involve some compression. So, around your hip, if you're sitting for a long period of time, you compress some tendons, they don't feel great. Shoulders, same thing. I'm laying on that side. People are like, oh, I'm not even using my arm. Why can't I lay on it? And I think that goes hand in hand with what you were just saying, right? Like I have bursitis, I have tendonitis, they go together like gin and tonic. So they're going to respond to either pressure sensitivity or load or movement based sensitivity. But if I have that notion in mind, then I can tell people, hey, tendons take time.
Mhm.
You're not doing anything wrong when you still have pain 6 months down the road or 9 months down the road. And in fact, it is quite common or maybe even expected for you to have pain down the road. So I think when I have a general idea, not that we can always be perfectly
Mhm.
infallible because none of our tests are really infallible, even your MRIs and your scans and everything else, they show anatomy, they don't show a painful experience in your body. But I can at least tell people, hey, don't give up after 4 weeks.
Mhm.
You know, this is going to be a long road. So instead, what's important to you? Whether you want to get back to some specific activity like gardening or playing with your kids, what's your baseline right now?
Mhm.
Can you only manage gardening for 5 or 10 minutes? Can you only manage playing with your kids for 15 or 20 minutes? Well, let's set that as our base and slowly bring that up to a time that's desirable for you. It's the same thing with any kind of gym routine or lifting routine. A lot of clients I have with tendon based pain will see their numbers go up in the gym, but then still report very similar
Mhm.
pain for a prolonged period of time. But because we had that conversation up front and they knew that this was normal, they're not alarmed by it. So they're not going for more testing. They're not going for injections. They're not stopping. They're not going light
Mhm.
because they can see that their goals are the things that are important to them can sort of, or they have a path forward for that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, do you think of any other things like with timeline that could be important for like understanding like what tissue or what we think could be contributing to someone's pain?
Yeah, I think to answer also like the question at the top, right? Like from a Like, do the patients need to know? I mean, I don't think anyone really needs to know like why their pain is there, right? To get better, but I think everyone likes clarity and likes to know what's going on and like what the plan is forward. And I think that's where if you can assess and have a good idea of okay, like these are the potential tissues that are irritated, and then obviously like with every session, right, like we're now reassessing to make sure that our decisions are somewhat accurate, and that we are improving and things like that, and do we need to modify our plan. But when you get that information, you're able to tell, hey, like this is very likely why your pain is here. That helps the buy-in, helps them have confidence in what we're able to do. Timelines for recovery is important, and then having this kind of like both us as the provider and the client, right, working together now moving forward. So I think that's probably where the most benefit of being able to figure out, okay, it is this specific type of tissue. This is how we're going to be working for. This is how long it's going to take, right? And the more we can educate the client, the more they're going to trust us. And I also think then they're going to trust the process and kind of go with it. And if you were just going to say like, yeah, it's serum over here, and didn't give them too much clarity, right? I don't think anyone's going to probably want to come back to see you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, from a patient perspective, and obviously every patient is so different, their experiences, their perspectives, their history. But, you reminded me of a phrase I'll often teach about a lot is a client's chief complaint is very rarely their chief concern. And I think that knowing the difference or trying to understand that difference when you're in that initial encounter with people is really important. So the example I had one just literally this week, a lady came in and her chief complaint was knee pain. Now, as we were talking, I can tell that activity meant a lot to her. She was, doing CrossFit and lots of other things, including running and biking, you name it. She's doing all the INGs. She really identifies with movement, but my knee hurts. And as I was kind of listening to her, I just sense a little bit of apprehension or fear with getting back into the squatting or the lunging or the biking and all these things that she enjoyed. And she kind of threw out a very quick, like passing thought about her dad. Again, like very
Mm,
benign, almost kind of flew under the radar. But it prompted me to hear a little bit of this concern or fear in her voice. And I just said, hey, did you ever have any family members by chance who had similar pains that were not able to go back? Or do you know any friends that had similar pains that required surgery or they couldn't get back to the things they love? And she immediately started crying.
mm,
And she was like, yeah, it was my dad. He had really bad knee arthritis. It started much later for him, but it got to a point where he needed a knee replacement, and then he was never the same after that. And now I am concerned that this is happening to me.
mhm,
Right. So, regardless of where, quote unquote, the pain driver was coming from, I knew that my assessment had to kind of alleviate those concerns for her. Right. So I was very flat when
mhm,
I told her, I said, okay, great. Well, we can look at this. Right. When you're thinking about a joint, joints need to do certain things, right? They need to flex and they need to extend
mhm,
at the knee. You have bones that need to rotate. I was like, so if you had, any sort of joint irritation or swelling or anything along those lines, we should be able to pick it up right here. We won't need a lot of scans or other things like that.
mhm,
So why don't we just start there? And that's all we did. And I took pictures of her range of motion side to side. And I was like, hey, look, the knee that doesn't hurt, it looks like this knee does all the exact same things that your other knee does. Right. Now you're active. You already told me that you have a genetic predisposition to maybe arthritis. Does that mean that you're going to definitely have arthritis like your dad? I don't know. But here's all the things that help: not drinking, not smoking, managing your weight, right? Staying active. And she was like, yeah, I don't drink, I don't smoke. I've always been this weight that I have. Great. Okay. So now the next thing is finding activities you enjoy and sticking with them. And then as we kind of did more and more of our assessment, it just seemed like she had maybe just more anterior knee pain or
mhm,
patellofemoral type pain syndrome. And then we had a conversation on just load management. Hey, this is going to be one of those things that's irritated potentially for a while. It could take years for some people to fully
mhm,
ameliorate this pain. But if you're thinking about your dad and you're thinking about, what makes my joint healthy, here's all the things that can do that for you. And I think that's kind of not maybe something we talked about a lot, but I do think that matters when we're talking about
mhm,
this conversation now of, well, what's my pain driver? and really how is it impacting not only my life now, but my thoughts about going into the future.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've had people with that same
Mhm.
idea, right? Chief complaint, chief concern.
Yeah, and I think what I was going to say is why we should always be looking beyond just like what is the so-called tissue that is irritated, and like what are the actual movements and how is it impacting your life, because somebody can come, and it happens all the time, where they've got the imaging, they've done all this stuff, and everything is perfectly fine from an imaging perspective, right? But then they've been navigating pain for who knows how long, right? And they just keep getting. I mean, I've heard it over and over again where doctors tell them there's nothing wrong with them. Other PTs and chiros say, I can't really do anything for you at this point, right? Because the imaging is clear. And we do know that maybe, sometimes you just have an elevated pain response where there's really like nothing specific going on, right? Especially if we're talking about like lower back pain, right? Like non-specific low back pain is the majority of cases. And maybe you can't even like lock in on like a very specific structure that is driving it. And we just need to kind of get them moving and get through fear, apprehension, and other things that might be limiting them from a stress standpoint. So I think when we're really looking at things overall, like looking at the whole system, the whole body, recovery, stress, life becomes an important part of the human, right? In order to help them solve especially long-term pain. So I think that was well said.
Yeah, and you've touched on a couple of points now already, but I think that the last thing I always think about is, yeah, I maybe want to have a general idea on how your pain behaves, but I don't necessarily need to be 100% accurate because, like you said at the beginning of the podcast and just now, I want to know what you want to get back to. I want to know why you can't get back to it. And then our assessment should sort of guide us in that direction.
Mhm.
If, whether you're talking about your knee or your back, does it have sensitivity to bending or extending? Does it have a hard time with producing force? Does it have a hard time accepting force? And then these are all things that we can learn from the assessment and say, hey, look, I'm not 100% sure what is happening or what your main pain driver is, but it seems like it's behaving this way.
Mhm.
Here's what I can say for certain: there are no red flags. There's nothing big and scary that we found in your assessment. This is a very common presentation of symptoms. We see lots of people like this day in and day out.
Mhm.
So, knowing what we want from you allows us to either
Right.
design a plan, alter what you're currently doing, and then set some expectations together. So I think that all in all, do I need to know, where your pain driver is to come from to help you? No, absolutely not. For all the reasons that you said and that we said. I do need to generally have maybe a bucket or idea, knowing that all these buckets sort of like overlap with one
Mhm.
another, just so I can set expectations and timelines for you to kind of keep you motivated to know that, hey, I'm in this for the long haul. I know it's going to take you months, if not maybe a year. And people accept that with surgery, which is always
Mhm.
funny to me, right? You get a surgery and you automatically accept in your mind, wow, this is going to be a year or more recovery process. And then when you kind of come in without that surgical experience, you're like, well, why isn't this getting better right
Mhm.
now? And it's like, well, hold on. We fixed it with the surgery. Literally, that's what the surgery did. It fixed it. And it's still going to take you a year to
Mhm.
recover. So why wouldn't you think that it would take maybe at least that long for you to really hedge everything that you want to do, create this sort of well rounded knee,
Mhm.
tendon, back, whatever? Because if it's all good after the surgery and you can still accept that, then why aren't we readjusting our field goal posts here a
Mhm.
little bit, together in rehab? So I think, to sum up for me, it allows me to just rule out anything red flag, trauma, overuse. But one thing, and maybe this is like a little breadcrumb for later on. I have tried to soften my stance with the X-rays and the MRI things, just because I think I maybe went too far to the pendulum, right? Of like
Mhm.
they really matter when I was a younger clinician, and then swung all the way over to
Mhm.
they don't matter. And now I'm kind of very more in the middle. So maybe that's something else that we can talk about in the future. Like, when do your scans matter or
Mhm.
not matter? And have you changed your viewpoints on them over the years? I'd be interested to hear that conversation
Yeah,
too with
we
you,
could
Joe.
definitely. I think that'd be a good topic. I have some thoughts for sure, but I think same. My take on imaging and even surgeries have probably changed over the course of time. Where it was like we don't really need them. We can do all this other stuff, and then being able to identify, okay, like this is a good time to maybe go get imaging, or maybe it's time to start considering surgeries or cortisone shots and all that other stuff. I've definitely changed my thoughts on that stuff over the course of time.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I think big picture for patients, don't worry if your PT can't give you an exact tissue diagnosis because we can still help you. And
Hmm.
exercise and interaction target so many different things, like you, Joe, were pointing out, with the whole person. And that's what I think makes us a lot different than the cortisone injection and the pill. The cortisone injection or the pill or even the surgery is targeting one very specific thing at a
Hmm.
time. But, through our interactions with clients, through movement-based therapies, through graded exposure, through exercise, we can really target the whole person. So I really think that that's what is the biggest gift of physical therapy, rehab, movement, exercise, you name it.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. I was gonna say something that I've been talking with like potential clients and even my clients as far as how like I've always had a really hard time of like what's my process, like how does it all work, like how do I like tell somebody like this is how it is. And this seems to have been hitting home a lot more, like trying to like it's like a very mechanical answer, which obviously rehab in our body is not very mechanical, but thinking about it from a perspective of versus just thinking like what is the tissue that is irritated, right? Like okay, we can get that answer. A lot of people think of like, oh, my glutes don't activate, or like we can become very muscle specific, right? Okay, hey, my core's not firing, my muscles aren't firing. And therefore, like then if we think about that, the answer is, well, we give exercise to that area. But if that doesn't work, then there's probably something else going on that's preventing you from activating or feeling like these areas are working right or bringing down your pain or whatever it is. And what we're trying to do is through this process, right? Like asking what all of your goals are, what do you want to get back to, and then figuring out where you are today and what's happening in our assessment. But once we have that, we can start. I like to think of things as like a parts to whole method from here. Okay,
Hmm.
well, your
Hmm.
glutes not firing. Well, what is the reason for that? Do you lack hip rotation? Do you lack hip extension? Like, are there physical limitations that can make it harder for your body to create a neurological connection to give you a
Hmm.
full output there? And if there's not, it doesn't matter how many times we're activating this area, as long as these underlying things happen, we're going to continue to have to just, you're going to have to do all the activation drills in the world to try to feel better. And then we can take that and layer it on as we're getting to more higher level stuff. If you wanted to play golf, but there's pain when you're bending forward, well, it's going to make sense that like add impact when you're playing golf, right? Like your body's going to probably start to hurt because you need to do all those positions there. So when we work backwards now, we can start to give your body the tools, right, to do the things that you want to do with less pain. And that kind of description of how we get there has been very helpful of recent. So I figured I'd share that to you and the listeners.
I love that. I love that. And I think even like a full dive into the process could be another
Hmm.
breadcrumb for
Hmm.
some episodes coming up. So I think we want to get on some doctors and surgeons because, like you said, I think our stance on this has maybe softened or changed over the years. So it'd be nice to maybe get a little different viewpoint there. Maybe we talk about processing, maybe we talk about imaging and all that stuff. So lots of exciting things, guys. Right? We said, I mean, if you enjoyed the first 100, you don't even want to know where me and Joe are going to go over the next 100. So please, please keep coming back. And as a reminder, Joe, what do they get if they drop a review?
They're going to get a sweet mug that hasn't been fully designed yet, but maybe that's the we'll get there, and we'll share this on social media as well. But yeah, we're gonna get a nice sweet coffee mug that will join your collection. You're gonna have to stack it on top of some other mugs in your cabinets because if you're like anyone that I know, you've maxed it out. You've
Exactly.
maxed out space no matter how much space you have.
Yeah. So drop your review, screenshot it, DM it to Mr. Joe Gambino over there at Joe Gambino DPT or myself at Strength and Motion _ PT. And we will reach out about how to get you your mug. Joe, thank you for another episode. Thank you for the last 100 episodes. Listeners, thank you for this episode and sticking with us all this time. Much love. And don't forget to come back next week for another exciting episode of the Beyond Pain